This is Medicine Matters, the Springer Medicine podcast. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Medicine Matters, the brand new podcast by Springer Medicine. I'm Dr. Jane Godsland, Clinical Director of Springer Medicine, and with me today is my colleague Dr. Erik Heintz, Editor-in-Chief of SpringerMedicine.de. Thanks for joining me, Erik.
Hi Jane, it's great to be here.
So, Erik, you've been leading SpringerMedicine.de, our German medical education site, for a really long time now. Can you tell us more about what you do at SpringerMedicine.de?
Yes, of course. Springer Medizin Verlag is one of the oldest scientific publishers in Germany, and for a couple of years now part of Springer Nature Publishing Group, which is, by the way, one of the world's leading scientific, educational and specialist publishers. Let me go a little bit back in history. Until the early years of this century, scientific publishing was basically publishing print journals and providing digital archives of these journals for digital databases like Medline or also for hospital or university libraries. Then around the year 2000, however, we started building up digital platforms targeting the individual doctors and their actual needs, providing them with relevant knowledge for their daily practice. And after about 10 years of following multiple paths, setting up multiple different platforms for different specialties, for different purposes, we decided to bring it all together and merge it into one platform, sort of a one-stop solution for our doctors. And this is how SpringerMedizin.de came into life in 2010. Nowadays, we provide German-speaking doctors of all specialties, regardless whether they work in hospitals or in private practice, with medical news, short summaries of current studies, video interviews and webinars with experts, lots of case reports from their clinical peers, continuous medical education, training programs for young doctors, and of course, still the digital archives of every journal we publish. In other words, we provide relevant information and tips for everyday medical work. We truly believe that the better informed the doctors are, the better they can treat their patients. And actually and luckily we can see that our efforts pay off. We know from the feedback we get that doctors actually change their approach or even their therapy after they watched, for example, a webinar or completed a CME course on our platform. Before joining Springer in 2003, I trained and worked as a doctor myself at the University of Munich, and I know how important it is to get the right information at the right time.
Right, so SpringerMedicine.de has, as you explain, proven to be of incredible value to German doctors over the last decade. And so that concept has evolved into the idea of an English language equivalent that's going to provide similar content for doctors across Europe. Is that right?
Yes, because we thought that with our internal connections within Springer Nature unfolding and strengthening, we realized it was time to offer more doctors in Europe the same advantages as we currently provide to German doctors. So SpringerMedicine.com is this new venture, a broad-scope digital medical education platform tailored to specialist doctors around Europe. And we are thrilled to have you, Jane, come to join us as a clinical director. And since you're new to the Springer Nature Group, perhaps you should introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. So my background is really in clinical research and traditional journals publishing. I started in clinical research at the University of Cambridge in the UK, and there I was looking at genetic profiles of endometriosis, but then moved on to pharmaceutical research in drug development in industry before moving into editorial work. My editorial career started working on the fledgling open access Biomed Central series, which are now part of Springer Nature, so it's good to be going full circle and working alongside those again. But I moved from the BMC series to the Lancet Group, where I then worked on a number of journals as peer review editor before launching the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health as editor-in-chief about 6 years ago. So that combines nearly 20 years in traditional publishing. And I'm really so excited to now be putting that experience towards the final step in what I see as the clinical education chain. So to me, that's making sure that practicing doctors really hear about those clinical advances and know how they can translate that knowledge into the best patient care. So yeah, I'm absolutely delighted to be working on Springer Medicine. It's really exciting to be at the cutting edge of medical education and feels like we're working where the future is.
Well, you talked there about the importance of getting new clinical advances from trials and journal articles actually into practice in the clinic. Is that something Springer Medicine will focus on?
Yes, very much so. Our mission at Springer Medicine is to deliver cutting-edge clinical advances to doctors in really easily digestible formats so that they can be confident that their patient care is up to date. We, as you mentioned, Erik, we know that doctors are constantly learning and that they absolutely want to provide their patients with the best possible care, and we're really here to support them in that.
And why is there a need for this new platform, given there are already plenty of existing sites where doctors can get their medical news or their medical education?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erik. You're absolutely right that there is an abundance of information being thrown at doctors every day. We are really in an exciting time of knowledge creation where scientific advances and new discoveries are happening at an incredible rate. And it's really tough for doctors and other healthcare professionals to find the time to stay up to date with all of that emerging information. And of course, doctors have a professional responsibility to maintain their clinical education through CME. So there is a need to help doctors, to help them find a time-efficient way to understand the most important new concepts in their fields or their subspecialties that are going to affect their clinical practice.
And how does Springer Medicine plan to do this?
Well, so I think there are three main ways, and that's by providing tailored medical education that is firstly comprehensive, is secondly trustworthy, and is thirdly digestible. So it'll be comprehensive in that we will provide a broad range of content, so content that spans a number of clinical specialties and subspecialties, and that content will be offered from a range of sources and in a range of formats. So Springer Medicine is quite unique, really, in that we're able to bring together the broad scope of medical education content that our colleagues throughout Springer Healthcare are already really well known for. So we'll be collating our award-winning IME programs and putting that alongside breaking news written by our expert team of in-house journalists and presenting alongside interactive webinars and podcasts featuring international experts. Of course, the platform will also highlight selected content from the hundreds of clinical journals published by Springer Healthcare, such as the BMC open access titles that I mentioned before, and also ADIS journals and others. And of course, because it's a Springer Nature product, incorporating all of these established and reputable brands, that means it's trustworthy, our second point. And so the healthcare professionals accessing this site can be really confident in the quality of the content. And finally, it's digestible, the third point. So the wonderful Springer Medicine editorial team will be filtering this overwhelming mass of information into easily readable newsletters. So this makes the vast content digestible, delivering bite-sized tailored content, allowing doctors to easily stay up to date with the most essential clinical advances in their field. So as a doctor, whether you like your medical education as a podcast or an interactive webinar or an online case-based program, then you can find an option that's going to work for you.
That sounds really impressive, Jane. And alongside the platform and the newsletters, there will be this podcast, which we've named Medicine Matters, as the official podcast for Springer Medicine. What is your vision for that?
Yes, so Medicine Matters. Medicine Matters is so called because, of course, medicine is really important. And what we'll be talking about in the podcast is all matters relevant to medicine. So I'm really hopeful that it's going to become essential listening, really, for all of our Springer Medicine subscribers, but also for their colleagues. It'll be a pan-specialty podcast that will be addressing the most exciting, controversial, and practice-changing topics across medicine as a whole. We'll be talking to leading clinical experts, to researchers and funding institutes, and also to industry partners about the well-known and perhaps more excitingly, the lesser well-known issues that might be affecting doctors in their clinics. We'll be looking at everything from rising rates of cancer deaths in patients with type 2 diabetes and other clinical topics to more pervasive issues in medicine, such as racial representation in medical education materials. And we'll be challenging some of the status quo along the way.
I personally can't wait to hear more. And if you want to join us, please subscribe to the Medicine Matters podcast, available from your usual podcast provider.
And please do also visit us at springermedicine.com, where you can register for updates when the full site launches in the spring. It's a really exciting time, and we can't wait to share more of what we've been up to with you in the coming months. Thank you for listening to this first episode of Medicine Matters, the Springer Medicine podcast. We'll see you next time. This podcast is intended for healthcare professionals for their ongoing medical education and entertainment. It should not replace the professional advice of a doctor or pharmacist and may not be used as a basis for diagnosis or any change to the prescribed treatment of disease. The views expressed by our moderators and guests are their opinions and do not represent the position of any third parties. The information given in the podcast is subject to change as the scientific field and clinical advances progress.